Greetings, one and all, to the most cursed, most cringiest corner of the internet. A YouTube channel content creator actively alienating everyone in both the analog and digital world. Well, welcome and good evening, wonderful dice of all alignments. I am Lunar D8. This is Let's Play Higurashi, the final chapter. Matsuribayashi. At least let it end with a blissful dream. The festival accompanying chapter. The riddle you have been entrusted with solving now finally becomes unraveled. What must be done to stop the chain? And what will happen in the ultimate end? It's a showdown between the conclusion you reached and the one I reached. There is no difficulty. You should understand that now. Everyone is entitled to happiness. The difficult part is accepting that everyone is entitled, and the difficult part is fulfilling that I too am entitled to happiness. The difficult part is working out a compromise. Frederica burned Castell. This is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to actual persons or organizations is entirely coincidental. The study was filled with piles of books and papers. In the study there was a full-figured old man writing something at his desk in utmost concentration. There was also a little girl sorting out papers on the carpet. She almost looked as though she was playing with them. But the serious expression she was wearing made it clear that she wasn't. "Grandpa? I'm done sorting them out." "Thank you. Let's see what happened. Look, there are lots of people with the same symptoms. It's way higher than the national average." That's exactly what I expected. There's an intriguing treatise over here too. It discusses psychosurgery and civilization. It also predicts that the existence of parasites inhabit the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is what causes emotions. That's right. Emotions aren't created by the heart. They're just side effects of the chemicals secreted by the organ known as the brain. If parasites capable of acting on that organ did exist and spread to create a colony, then that colony's thoughts would be unified. So are parasites the cause of the spread of ideology? When ideologies clash, is that because different parasites are competing to expand their habitat? That, or to expand religion, to expand national borders, or to expand a race? It's hypothesized that our differing cultural communities and their conflict are the result of parasites influencing human thoughts. There are people in other countries who think the same thing as you, Grandpa. Of course there are. There are countless parasites on this earth, and it is well known that some coexist with their hosts, and some control their hosts. We've also discovered plenty of parasites that infect humans. Yet despite that, we adamantly deny the possibility that parasites could infect humans and control their hosts, even the hypothesis of such a thing. Why do you think that is? Humans aren't special in any way. Because that hypothesis would also mean changing our view to see the spread of ideologies from the perspective of epidemiology. It conflicts in ideology. If conflicts in ideology can be resolved through debate, then they're peaceful, but if those conflicts occur epidemically, they become frightening. And if one were to treat bad thoughts or the spread of culture as an epidemic, think about the Black Plague in Europe during the Middle Ages. A vile infectious disease spread. They forced infected people into hospitals and didn't release them until they completely recovered. Some even died in those hospitals. They burned their corpses. They confiscated and burned everything those patients touched for fear the plague infected it. They even suspected families of infection and forced them into hospitals. So, they'd hospitalize healthy people over individual ideas. Replace an idea with a disease. The rest is the same. Patients won't be released until they completely recovered. People burn everything that may have been touched by the patient. They force the patient's family to go to the hospital. People are free to think what they will, right? Thoughts aren't pests. If an idea was created by parasites, it would be exactly the same as a plague. In other words, an idea is like an incurable epidemic. Why does this remind me of the video game Raging Loop and AI the Somnium Files? Because they discuss a bit of the same thing in the later chapters of those games too. So you mean anyone with a different idea is treated like they have a disease? That's right. If we bring this to a logical conclusion, parasites could be responsible for mass murders of people belonging to different races or religions. But this can be seen as justifying genocide. Therefore, talking about parasites in brain has been taboo since the war. What does taboo mean? It means something people shouldn't get involved with. That's why nobody researches these things. Nobody even remembers anything about parasites that live in the brain. They assume that parasites which control humans simply don't exist. Haha, that's almost funny. How can they prove something doesn't exist? That's just impossible. Exactly. Proving that the devil exists is easy. You just have to show him to someone. But you can't prove he doesn't exist. You can't show somebody something that doesn't exist. It's almost as if the parasites in the brain are controlling people so they can keep their own existence a secret. Me and my grandfather shared a happy laugh together. Humans are simply another animal. In this natural world, we might be at the top of the food chain, but it's difficult to think that we are superior to others. Humans can be controlled by parasites. Just because the existence of such parasites hasn't been proven, doesn't mean they don't exist. I mean, hypothetically, this could be expanded to angels, demons, aliens, AI. Hey, whatever, I don't know, crazy conspiracy theory trail you want to go down. No, honestly, a lot of times, the difference between a theory and the truth is just wait 6 months. They exist. I know they do. That's happened before in the scientific world, right? I just imagine aliens landing, shaking Trump's hand, and saying they came here for Hulkamania and Ozfest. What do we tell them about Hulkamania and Ozfest? What can I say? I think Hulk Hogan and Ozzy Osbourne were very entertaining. Did I miss anything? That's happened before in the scientific world, right? Heck, think about the planets Neptune and Uranus, or microbiology, atoms, electricity. It is really fascinating to think about, like, just things like chemical reactions, molecular chains, organelles within cells, or on the macro scale, galactic filaments. Those are it's very interesting. Heck, I got some books on World War I, World War II. It's just interesting to look back at how that is, but at the same time, you look at that stuff and it's like, that's horrible. Most of the shit in the past was horrible. Honestly, a lot of that would be really horrible, and nobody really should have ever had to go through that shit. I know I'd be very, very unhappy with that whole World War I, World War II stuff. Heck, I wouldn't have survived it. But yeah, just there's a lot of things that people want to complain about, and like in terms of there would be anger, like it's like, oh, this and this, like, but it's like you ever like just read about exactly what was going on in World War II? It's fucking horrible. It's still fascinating, but it's awful. That's right, not all scientists are recognized for their work while they're alive. There were many who were ridiculed. They couldn't prove their theories to be true. But Grandpa, I hope your theory will be recognized before you die. Otherwise, it would be so sad. Don't worry. God doesn't ignore people who work hard. Hard work always pays off in the end. But when will that happen? Nobody knows when God is going to descend from heaven. Just like you never know when you'll be robbed. So we always have to be alert and ready, so that we don't miss our chance. That was something my grandfather said all the time. Nobody knows when their efforts will bear fruit, but it will happen one day. That's why you must always work hard. So you have no regrets when the time comes. Your efforts will bear fruit someday. That's what he meant. But is it going to happen before you die? Even though there were so many scientists whose work weren't recognized while they were alive? That was such a cruel thing to say, but I didn't mean to be cruel. I had seen how hard my grandfather had been working. I also knew he wouldn't live forever. I just wanted his work to gain recognition before he died. Do you know of the resurrection of Jesus Christ? Yeah, he was crucified and resurrected after 3 days. You told me about it. How do you think Jesus was resurrected? Didn't he just get up as if he was waking up in the morning? He was buried after his execution, so his body was in the ground. Yeah, I mean, technically a cave, but did he break open the tombstone and crawl out like a zombie? Ha ha ha! No. That wouldn't be called a resurrection. The sinners who killed Jesus imagined exactly the same thing. Jesus predicted just before he was executed that he would come back to life after 3 days. The sinners buried Jesus, sealed his tomb, and posted guards to watch over it. But what Jesus meant wasn't that he would resurrect physically. He meant his teachings would be resurrected. Okay, though I disagree with that. But I do get where the guy is coming from. And I agree with the point he's making. But I also agree that Jesus did physically resurrect back from the dead. Best way to describe me? I'm a Christian. I believe in God. I believe in Jesus. Don't really attend church very often. Most of the pastors and preachers I seem to not like. Turns out a lot of preachers and pastors are just generally not good people. And in general, I'm also a bit antisocial, but in general, I'd rather just read the Bible and do stuff on my own. Beyond that, yeah, I believe in God, but I believe in Jesus, but I have some disagreements about certain things. But in general, I believe the most important thing is just to pursue knowledge and to try to be a good person. And if you have people in your life you care about, then, well, to just love them to the best of your ability. And try your best to be happy. To have good experiences in life. And to learn. Like I said, pursue knowledge and try to be, compassion. But above all, just take one day at a time. After 3 days, Jesus' teachings were resurrected. People regained their belief. The hearts of those who wanted to be shown the proper way revived his teachings. That's what the resurrection of Jesus is all about. He came back to life in the hearts of his believers. Jesus doesn't exist physically on this earth, but he exists in the people's hearts. In other words, that's when Jesus became an existence superior to humans. Even if it's after the author's death, as long as his work receives a fair evaluation, it will live again as a great achievement. Even if my body is gone, by then my life will return and receive recognition. Does that mean you'll become a god, just like Jesus did? Indeed. My research will be recognized for what it was someday. That's when I will become a god. That's why I'm not in a rush to achieve that recognition. I don't know when that day will come. God doesn't know that either. But the day will come. That's why I need to continue to work as hard as I can. It was very sad to hear my grandfather say that his life would end one day. He wasn't ill, and he didn't only have a few years left to live, but set next to the average lifespan, his remaining years didn't look like much. The only person left in my life was my grandfather. So I didn't even want to consider what it would be like with him gone. Grandfather must have remembered that I didn't like to talk about the subject. With a tender smile, he gently patted my head. Of course, I want my research to be recognized before I die. I will do my best. Yep, I'll do my best to help you too. I purposely didn't mention the before you die part. I caught myself before I said it. Thank you, that makes me very happy to hear. Grandfather smiled in satisfaction. His research wasn't exactly outrageous. He wasn't trying to uncover the mysteries of the universe. He was only searching for the possibility that parasites could be responsible for human behavior. Nothing more than that. Nothing outrageous. It really wasn't a wild idea. We even had some leads. Hinamizawa Village, Shishibone City, XX Prefecture. The villagers there are possessed by a powerful homesickness. When they are unable to return, they allegedly behave abnormally, as if they are cursed. There are also some bizarre rules in place in that village based on their belief system. When he was working with the military during the war, my grandfather noticed similarities between the people in Hinamizawa and assumed that some kind of existence was responsible for their odd behavior. He'd been researching it ever since. In the middle of the 20th century. Everyone's like, you probably shouldn't be drinking this Monster Energy drink, Looter. I'll probably just drink half of it and save the other half for tomorrow. Numerous strange diseases were discovered all over Japan. Most of them were caused by infectious parasites, and people started to pay attention to this forgotten field of study. Grandfather's research was simply one of those investigations into such diseases. Therefore, he believed it would be published amongst other research and attain recognition soon. But if his research didn't bear fruit before his death, I wanted to continue it. I wanted to continue his research. Grandfather taught me. Resurrection isn't something that happens physically. It's when your life's work is appreciated. That's when he meant by resurrection. That's when he'll become a god. So when my grandfather dies, he'll still be with me forever. I wouldn't have to be alone ever again. I will always be with my grandpa. Our works will gain recognition, and we will both become gods, gaining eternal peace. I will make my grandfather into a god. I will become a god. Therefore, we will be granted eternity. We'll be together forever and ever. I was looking at the key on the keychain. The key was labeled Henhouse, but the lock Eriko was trying to open didn't belong to that door. It should have opened effortlessly. At least that's what was supposed to happen. but it didn't open. I noticed beads of sweat forming on Eriko's forehead. She was the one who came up with this idea. Eriko was starting to panic. The rest of us started to panic too. This only opens the hen house. Let's stop. Let's go back. Shush. We were supposed to be cleaning out the hen house. If they found us back here, if they found out why we were here, and why we were trying to open up the lock to the back door, then all four of us were sure to be sentenced to Splayed Piggy. Don't panic, Eriko. That key opens this lock, right? You already tried it, right? Will you shut up for a minute? This is the right key. It's just hard to open, that's all. She was almost shrieking. Our hearts were pounding loudly. It was as though the sound of our heartbeats was echoing throughout the hallway. And at that point we heard footsteps that didn't belong to a child. Shush! Somebody is coming! The three of us held our breath. But Eriko didn't hear it. She kept fussing with the lock and the key, as if everything would be okay if she just could open the lock. Eriko, somebody is coming. Be quiet. I know this is the right key. I'm not dreaming. I already tried it and opened it. Come on, why isn't this working? When this lock is open, we can be happy, and we can say goodbye to this hell. Eriko, someone is coming. My father and mother died. I don't know exactly how old they were. I was too young to remember. They went shopping without me, and that must be why they were punished. It was a train accident. What a terrible disaster. A lot of people died in that incident. But maybe my father was one of the lucky ones. He was still alive when he arrived at the hospital, so he was able to share his final words with me. My mother died instantly. Daddy? 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 I didn't want to admit that this person I could hardly recognize was my father. As I called out to him, I hoped that it was someone else instead. But unfortunately, it was my father. Maybe I shouldn't have woken him, because when I woke him, he was reminded of this miserable agony that he had forgotten. Ooh, Daddy, Daddy, Daddy. Daddy. He tried to move his right arm so he could pat my head, but his arm was wrapped in bandages and his hand was no longer there. I couldn't find his hand anywhere on the bed. I only had scary memories of his right hand. Its main job was to slap me when I did something bad, but I never wished it to be gone. Besides, that hand also patted my head, even though that only happened a few times. It was a big, warm hand, and it stroked my head very gently. But no matter what good deeds I did, he could no longer rub my head. No, his hand was the least of his worries. He had to go into emergency surgery. The doctors already warned me that the chances of him surviving was very low. That was why I was allowed to see him, regardless of his condition. Not only could he no longer rub my head, he might be gone forever. Daddy? The surgery will make you better, right? Daddy will get better, right? Right? Listen carefully. Your daddy might not make it. Even if I die, you have to be strong, okay? No. You'll get better. The doctor is going to make you better, so you're not going to die. He was a stubborn and old-fashioned father. He believed endurance was a virtue, and he never complained about anything. That was why I couldn't believe he actually said he might not make it. I tried desperately to deny his words, but even that wish wouldn't prolong his life. My father, knowing his time was limited, tried to tell me some important things, but I interrupted his efforts by crying like a baby. I just wanted him to slap me. just like he used to do every time I cried like a baby, but he would never slap me again. Listen well. Your mother and I both lost all our family in the war. So, after I'm dead, there won't be anyone left to take care of you. He didn't need to tell me that. My parents used to tell me that all the time, so that I was well aware of that fact. In other words, my father was the only relative I had left in this entire world. If I die, you can count on Dr. Takano. Dr. Hifumi Takano. Can you say it? Hifumi Takano. That's right. Dr. Hifumi Takano. He is my former teacher. He will help you. Cough, cough, cough. Daddy, 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 daddy. Many doctors came into the room in a hurry. He wanted to tell me something else, but the doctor stopped him from talking, so I wasn't able to hear him. I was kicked out of the room. I didn't know what to do. Nobody told me how my father was doing, or when the surgery was going to start, and nobody told me that was going to be the last conversation I ever had with my father. I think I asked people at the government office about Dr. Takano. They'd asked me if I knew his phone number. I said I didn't. Then they didn't ask me anything further. Sometimes they told me they'd look into it, but nothing led to anything. They couldn't find me a guardian, so I ended up going to an orphanage. At the time, there were plenty of orphans from the war, so although there were many orphanages around, they were all full. There were also some orphanages run by civilians. I was sent to one of those civilian orphanages. There was no profit to be had in taking in an orphan in the first place, so I thought those civilians who were running orphanages must have been very good people. I was sure they hoped that the children would grow in this loving environment and enter into society with a sense of gratitude, but reality isn't so kind. How many children in this world can actually express their gratitude toward their parents in the first place? Children are supposed to be nurtured by their parents' love. Therefore, when that environment is destroyed, their hearts are wounded. Every child has his or her own personality. Receiving affection doesn't guarantee that a child will become someone angelic. Not everyone's heart can be healed. That was why there were some problem kids at the orphanage. Maybe I shouldn't call them problem kids, though. The sadness and despair of losing their parents, and the anger of having to hide such feelings, filled those kids' hearts. Spending time individually with the children could have solved their problems. But though the orphanage where I was, none of the staff members even tried to spend time with them, or put in an effort to understand them. All they could do was make sure the kids followed the rules. Therefore, they could only see the children as emotional pleas for helps, as problems. In this world, nobody expresses love without expecting something in return. The person who founded the orphanage was expecting something in return as well. He wanted the children to appreciate him. That was why such a faint dream was destroyed by cruel reality. The children called the orphanage a prison, and nobody appreciated the staff at all. In fact, all they did was complain. That made the staff slowly realize that love alone couldn't run a facility like that. Just like how the children called it a prison, the staff started to recognize the facility as a prison too. It was a chain reaction resulting from mistrust on both sides. The staff bound the children with rules so they could suppress problem behavior. There was a framed picture of the founder of this orphanage, but I had never seen him in person. Was he satisfied with the fact that he had put his own money into this social service? Or maybe he finally realized his dream of being surrounded by angelic children and being celebrated for what he did was simply that, a dream. I don't know. But there's one thing I'm certain of. Such a dream didn't exist at the orphanage. There were so many rules, and several plausible standards outlined for us. But the most valued one was silence. Children's chatter tends to increase each other's volume, just like mics drawing closer, and sometimes that leads to fights and the disturbance of order. So children were forbidden from speaking with each other. With those disallowed, they must have thought things would go smoothly. However, I think I always heard people's voices at the orphanage. There were two kinds of voices. One was the staff yelling, and the other was children crying. We were not allowed to walk around the inside of the orphanage freely, so we never knew who it was that was crying. One time, along with the crying and yelling, we heard the noise of metallic things being smashed against each other. We knew it was some kind of punishment, but there was no way for us to even imagine what it was. We trembled, pretending we didn't hear anything, and kept working on our assignments. One of my roommates told me it was the casket punishment, but she didn't tell me any further, and I didn't want to know either. Even if we behaved exactly the same way as yesterday, if the staff were in a bad mood, they might pick on us. So even if I didn't want to know, I might suddenly find out what the casket punishment is one day. The footsteps of a staff member were getting closer. We noticed them, so we straightened our backs and pretended we were studying hard. It was more important that the staff saw us doing so than actually getting any work done. I noticed the girl next to me was falling asleep, so I poked her with my elbow. She noticed my signal and straightened her back like the other children. It was almost evening. This was the hardest time for us to keep ourselves awake, and the most dangerous time. The door to our room opened and a mean-looking man showed up. Then he looked around to make sure none of us were falling asleep. Even if we were actually studying hard, if he thought we were asleep, we were out. That was why we had to make sure we appeared to be studying very hard, and the man walked around our desks. I hoped he would just walk by me. That was when we all prayed, as we kept working on our homework. The more we pretended to study hard, the more we could hear the sounds of metal objects, the sound of metal objects crashing into each other, along with screams. We couldn't even imagine what the poor subject of that punishment was going through. Maybe there was something even worse than the casket punishment. To erase such fears, we tried to concentrate even harder on our work. We kept working. As the metal sounds and the screams went on forever, the only time we were allowed to exchange words with our roommates was right after turning lights off to go to bed. Being located in the middle of the mountains, the orphanage was very quiet at night. After making sure the staff members were far enough from our room, we enjoyed talking amongst ourselves. That was the only leisure time allowed to us, though it wasn't anything nice like enjoying pleasant conversation. Why? Because we mostly talked about others behind their backs. We spoke of things like, that member of staff is only strict or unfair or malicious toward this person, and so on. We just repeated those topics forever, until someone couldn't keep themselves awake anymore. We even discussed how we could get back at the staff, and we took revenge on all of them in our imagination. Some kids even started to cry when talking about it, difficult as it was for us. Although the subjects we spoke of were negative, talking about them was the only way to vent our frustration. And even though we felt despair about tomorrow, we were able to fall asleep. But sometimes a different subject popped up. It was about the Yuri Goaka House of Love and Mercy on the other side of the river. Yeah, over there I hear they got not only the nap time, but snack time too. Plus, their president is a very nice person. The House of Love and Mercy was a privately run orphanage, just like the one I was at. But it was a very kind facility, unlike ours. It seemed like a fantasy land compared to our current environment. A few years before, when this place was a lot worse, a few children tried to escape. It was hard to believe. There was a time when this orphanage was even worse to live at. Supposedly 3 or 4 people tried to escape. I don't know the exact number, though. They headed to the House of Love and Mercy. Their escape was a success, except for one unlucky child. They were able to get to the property of the House of Love and Mercy. I guess the staff couldn't follow them into the other orphanage's property. In other words, the other facility's property had to be out of their jurisdiction. The staff were frustrated that kids got away from them, and they dragged the one they caught back here. I'm sure they wanted to bring back the others who got away from them too. I'm certain the staff were determined not to let a single one escape. It was easy to see the determination in the obstinate way they locked the place up after the event. But they were never able to bring back the ones that got away. No matter how much the staff were mortified, they couldn't reclaim the children and punish them. In other words, if you could make it to the House of Love and Mercy, then you could escape the evil clutches of this hell. On the other hand, the one they caught went through such misery afterwards. Yet the exact details of how he was punished were never passed down. All that remained were the ominous phrases left by those who knew him at the time. The drowned ducky, the mashed caterpillar, the splayed piggy. I can't even imagine what kind of punishments they were. The only thing I can say is that those punishments were supposed to be far more harsh than the casket punishment, which was the most cruel punishment I knew of the time. I can only imagine how horrible those punishments were from their ominous names. After that, the captured kid's wish came true, and he was able to leave the orphanage. Was he able to leave the orphanage safely and enjoy his freedom while breathing in fresh air under the blue sky? Well, according to the rumors, that wasn't what happened at all. While he was playing in the boiler room, he slipped and fell, injured his brain, and died. Yep, that sounds completely plausible. I mean, I'm sure he died, but I'm sure that wasn't the reason. The children were instructed not to go into the boiler room after that incident. Everyone knew the boiler room was always locked. So everyone knew he was killed. And not just that, he was killed after being tortured. He was killed to teach the other children that they would face hell on earth if they tried to escape. Yet those who faced that risk and made it out obtained ordinary, average lives full of love and mercy's namesake, which were far better conditions than what we lived in here. Maybe the House of Love and Mercy was really heaven. Maybe all the orphanages are pretty much the same. But compared to my orphanage, I bet anything else would have been better. Even if someone escaped successfully, the police would catch him. Then he'd be sent back to the orphanage, which would pretty much be the same thing as being killed. However, if he could reach the House of Love and Mercy, they'd take him in. They wouldn't send him back. By talking about escaping to the House of Love and Mercy, we were trying to forget how cruel reality was to us. But then one day, the leader of our group, Eriko, said to us quietly, "You guys ever listen to the bands Rammstein or Icebreaker? Especially the music videos? Would you try to escape if you had the chance to?" Who didn't want to escape from here? It was a rather foolish question, but that wasn't what she meant. If there was a chance to escape, would you take that chance knowing that you had to go through if you got caught? Knowing what you had to go through if you got caught. That was what she meant. Not one of us could answer immediately. If the previous escape incident was a total success, then we might have thought differently. But after that, the orphanage had tightened up, and security prevent runaways. All the doors and windows were locked heavily, and it wouldn't be at all easy to get out. Even if another group escape was planned, the success rate would be very low. 3 escaped and 1 was caught before. Maybe 2 would be caught next time. No, maybe everyone would be. If I could, I'd want to escape, but the House of Love and Mercy is so far away. The bridge is long too. We'd all be caught before we get there. Besides, we can't even go outside. Everything is locked up. There were locks all over the orphanage. To escape, you'd need a key for both the inside and the outside. And after the lights were turned off, E- Even each select section of the hallway was individually locked up. Make no mistake, this was a prison. According to the rumors, you guys remember the Stanford prison experiment? Or the Milgram experiment? Or the Harlow experiment? Or the Cocaine Monkeys experiment? Or the Mouse Utopia? Orphanages receive government funding depending on the number of children they house, so if anyone escapes, they lose money. Also, if we were to expose the conditions of the orphanage, they would end up being expected, and things would get complicated for them. That was why they were so intent on keeping us locked up. Sure, if there was a chance, I would want to escape, but realistically, there's no way we could. Every door is locked. Well, did you know? The hen house, the courtyard, uses the same key as the door to the back stairs. Eh? Really? Shh. Eriko shushed us. Sometimes mass-produced locks take the same key. Of course, most places use different types of locks so that this won't happen. But the staff at the orphanage must have overlooked it. So there were 2 locks that use the same key at the orphanage. However, most of us never had a chance to even touch the keys. But there were a few exceptions. One of those was the hen house. Each group took turns taking care of different chores. If your group was assigned to clean the hen house, you'd have to get the key to it from the teacher's office. You were supposed to return the key immediately after you were done. But while taking care of the hen house, the key was in the children's hands. While the staff would occasionally come around to check, they couldn't keep an eye on us forever. Eriko-chan, you aren't thinking about using that key, are you? Let's not. It's too dangerous. Of course, it's dangerous if there's only one of us. But it's different if we're in a group. Wait, why? Do you know why only one kid was caught the last time they tried to escape? They were desperate, and so to escape as a group, they did something to increase the chance of success. That was why only one of them was caught. What did they do? They scattered as they ran. They dashed in different directions. They waited until the day when there were only a few people working at the orphanage, and they ran away in this way and that. And so, although it all depended on luck, it would increase the chance of success, for sure. On your own, you would probably have no hope. But if the staff were the chase after other children, then your own chance of escaping successfully would increase. In other words, Eriko was inviting us to escape with her. The more children joined, the more each of our chances would increase. But among us, there were children who tattled to the staff for their own benefit. So she had to be very careful about who she talked to. Eriko must have trusted us a lot. Eriko, me, Tomomi, and Kikuko. Kikuko. For children. 4 children. Do any of you want to stay here a day longer? The 3 of us shook our heads, but at the same time we couldn't agree to escape with her either. Of course we don't want to stay here for a day longer, or even an hour longer. Even if we did exactly the same thing as we did yesterday, we might get yelled at tomorrow. I can't stand this anymore. I can't stand living in fear of what to do and what not to do, so I won't be yelled at. We all feel the same way. We could endure strict rules, but it was almost impossible to endure vague ones. It wasn't too much of a stretch to say that the rules depended on the mood of the staff. I do feel like there are some situations where rules and punishment aren't for the sake of correction or for helping someone. In certain situations, it literally exists because the person who made the rules just wants to punish. The punishment's not meant for correction. It's not meant to help or to teach someone a rule. Heck, it's not even necessarily meant to keep order. It's meant for the own sadistic pleasure of the person who wants the rule. Whether it's pleasure in hurting somebody or in the pleasure of having complete control. Either way, it's psychotic and abusive. This is okay. That isn't okay. Such borderline rules change daily. And if we were to say anything about that, we would be treated horribly for it. Yeah, any system that works like that is unjustifiable. Even if you're not talking about children, I will escape even if I have to do it alone. Like I said, the more people that join, the better our chance. Think about it. If they find out about this henhouse key trick, they are sure to change the lock on the back door. In other words, we only have one chance. So even if you regret not joining in later, it'll be too late. But, oh, I'm scared. I'm scared too. If we get caught, we'll be killed. Tomoni and Kikuku, Tomomi, Tumomai, Kikuko weren't the only ones who felt afraid. The fear was perfectly understandable because all of a sudden the fear of the punishment that would follow had become very realistic. I'm sure Eriko felt the same way too, but her courage was suppressing her fear, and because of that she shared her idea with us. So, do you plan to stay here forever? No way. I know you're scared, but this is the only chance we have. You have to be brave just this once. What about you, Miyoko? Do you want to go with me? Unlike I wasn't trembling that much. Of course, I was scared in my own way, but compared to the other two, I must have appeared rather calm. Can we really escape? Of course, Eriko couldn't guarantee our success, but I had to ask her anyway. There's no guarantee, but if you join me, I'll have a better chance of escaping than trying to run on my own. Of course, the same goes for you too. Eriko gave a calculated reason, but I'm sure she just wanted a friend to agree with her. That was probably more important to her than increasing her chances to escape. If you're scared too, then I won't force you. Miyoko and I will escape ourselves. And remember, guys, Mio Takano. She eventually does get adopted by Hifumi Takano. But definitely her life would have been a lot better. You know, had she been able to get a hold of Hifumi Takano. Heck, if it was such an important concern to where her parents were constantly saying, you have no one else in your life other than us. We are literally your only family. But if something happens to us, to the point that you're constantly bringing it up, at that point you should have already, trained her to know how to contact Hifumi Takano, been in contact with him. Heck, already introduced him to your daughter, and also had his contact information literally plastered on your wall, and on the fridge, and in a book. Heck, you should have had him listed as your emergency contact in your medical forms, so the moment you die, he was contacted, even if your daughter were unconscious too. But she should have already known. Hifumi Takano should have already known from day one too. He should have already, if it was such a big concern where you felt the need to constantly tell your daughter all the time about it, you should have basically had it, painted on the wall in big print. Here is the wall dedicated entirely to the name, address, and phone number that I have you memorize of the person who would be responsible for you in the case of our death, who we have also made sure to already be introduced and know about you. That would only be, common sense? 2 is enough. Eriko rushed the two to make up their minds. It almost looked cold, but that was her way of mustering their courage, because it was very possible that regardless of the outcome of our escape attempt, as our 2 roommates, those 2 would be held responsible. It's not like we'll do it tomorrow. Our turn to take care of the hen house is in a week. We'll wait for them the perfect time to do it. If we don't feel that it's safe, then we'll wait until our next turn. We'll be very careful. The rotation of the staff and the timing were important, but we also each had to know the way to the House of Love and Mercy. We were planning to split up, so we had to know the area. I made up my mind. Okay, I'm coming with you. But let's time our escape very carefully, okay? Of course. We'll be killed if we get caught. I don't want to die. I'll come too. Me too, me too. Tomone and Kikuko agreed, and so we all... So we all decided to escape as a group. We waited for the perfect opportunity. We waited for the day where only a few staff members were at the orphanage, and we decided to let God take care of the rest. Ah, it opens. It's open. Maybe it was the way I did it? Eriko tried to open the lock several times without success, but I got it open on the first attempt. The back door opened slowly, and we felt a cool breeze. This wasn't the world of freedom just yet. In fact, it was the exact opposite. If the staff were to find out that we were here, we would be in big trouble. It was a world of danger. But unless we went through that dangerous world, we wouldn't be able to go any further. Okay, let's go. I think Eriko wanted to say that. We were planning to leave with that as our cue, but what we heard instead wasn't Eriko's voice. What are you kids doing there? We started to run. It was raining. We all got soaked immediately and our clothes stuck to our skin. While that normally would be very uncomfortable, we couldn't even stop to think about that. We could only keep running in the rain. We were dashing on gravel, but it felt more like trudging through a muddy rice field. My feet kept sinking, and I couldn't pull them up. I was frustrated because no matter how fast I tried to run, I wasn't gaining any speed. I felt a sense of urgency. I heard someone yelling, "Escape!" behind me, and all I could do was run like crazy. Oh, okay, everyone go in different directions. Scatter. Come on, scatter. With Eriko's cue, we all went different ways, hoping they wouldn't be coming after us. Would we be able to reunite safely at the House of Love and Mercy? All four of us were there together, or maybe someone would be missing. No, maybe everyone else would make it, and I'd be the one who gets caught. My thoughts were interrupted by the voice of a staff member coming from behind me. Hold it, wait, hold it right there. The staff members should have numbered fewer than us, so if I was lucky, they wouldn't be coming after me. Praying that the staff voices I heard in the distance weren't after me, I looked back for a moment. If I had time to turn around, why didn't I take another step forward? Why didn't I try to escape further? As I turned around, I felt a huge hand cover my face. Its pinky finger slipped into my open mouth. The hand grabbed my face, shoved me into the muddy gravel. Of course, I didn't stay quiet. I fought back, and then I saw his face. It was the scariest face I had ever seen. I realized it immediately. He only wanted to capture me alive to use me as an example. And considering that what would happen to me afterward, killing me here on the spot wouldn't pose any problem, would it? Yes, he looked at me with unworldly hate, ready to end my life here and now. His pinky finger ended up touching my tongue. The indescribably nasty taste sent an icky feeling through my whole body. Ah, that's it. This is what my murder tastes like. He was going to shove that finger down my windpipe and suffocate me. And so in order to live, I fought back in the only way I could. Yeah! Something warm filled my mouth. It felt like swallowing blood after a nosebleed. I spit it from my mouth and ran without turning around, leaving behind the staff member clutching his pinky finger. You little shit, damn you, I'll kill you! I heard his roars echoing behind me. It wasn't a man that was after me, it was a beast. He had no interest in capturing me. His only goal was to see me dead. My shoes had slipped off. They weren't sneakers, so they came off easily while I was running like mad. My bare feet struck the gravel over and over. It was painful, but I didn't care. Because if I stopped, I knew what would happen to me. Tree branches cut my face, and barbed wires scratched my thighs. My feet and toes were bloody from running on gravel. The blood from the staff member's pinky finger dripped down my mouth, staining my chin and chest. I was running for my life with scratches and cuts all over my body. If I were to get caught, I would be killed. If my pursuer had any sense, then I would be killed after being tortured. But if he didn't, I would be killed on the spot. I don't want to be killed, and I don't want to be killed. My lungs and heart were about to explode. My mind was blank from fear and lack of oxygen. I was about to lose consciousness. I might have given in. If I didn't hear the voice of the staff member coming after me. My knees were shaking. My legs wouldn't move properly. I felt like I was going to fall like a puppet without strings, but I couldn't fall. I couldn't fall just yet. It was too late. My face had hit the gravel. I felt the awful sensation of falling, and immediately after the roar of the beast coming from behind me. Damn you, my finger! My finger! Wah! Ha! 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 I must have hit my thigh against the steering wheel when I jumped. I can feel the throbbing pain delayed slightly. I'm sweating all over. I wiped the sweat on my forehead and put my hand on my chest, only then realizing how fast my heart was beating. I rubbed my thigh. I rubbed it in a straight line. That's not where I hit the steering wheel, but I felt like this is where it hurts. I can't see a scary beast in the moonlit car. I have my shoes on, and I'm not covered in blood. My toes are fine too. Someone knocked on the window, startling me. Major, it's time. Oh. Thank you. I wanted to take a nap, so I told him to come wake me up in an hour. Maybe an hour was too long? Too long a nap actually makes you tired. I put my seat back up and got out of the car. The cool breeze feels good on my skin. I only see the moon. There's nothing else to see on this mountain trail. My car and a command vehicle disguised as a trailer are parked on the side of the street. I can still feel that bad taste in my mouth. I spat it out on the side of the street, but even that couldn't get rid of it. The taste of blood, saliva, and rain. Sweat from my forehead and raindrops got into my mouth, so I couldn't swallow, so I ended up drooling. That sensation around my lips brought back memories, and I tried to wipe my mouth. Whew. Maybe I'm nervous. That's why I had such a bad dream. I think there's a coffee machine in the command vehicle. An unpleasant cup of coffee will wake me up. So? Has anything happened yet? No, not yet. We just got Jifu's schedule check-in. Everything is okay over there, I see. Hey, could someone make me a cup of coffee? Sure. Cream and sugar? Just cream, please. No. Put in some sugar, too. I still have a bad taste in my mouth. The feeling of biting and crushing his little finger and his filthy blood filling my mouth. I'm sure a sweeter cup of coffee will wash down that bad taste and also wake me up from my nightmare completely. The House of Love and Mercy. Experienced a memory of escape. Banquet to back end over. One more speaker, then the toast starts. Are you ready? This is the back end. We're ready. We can't hear anything from inside, so please give us a cue when the speech is wrapping up. Listen up, 10 bottles of beer per table. Make sure to deliver them to your areas smoothly. Young hotel workers dressed smartly in bow ties pulled bottle after bottle out of the beer cases, preparing for the toast. They waited for their cue to serve the drinks while listening through the intercom. At a normal party, they could just put bottles of beer on the table ahead of time. But if there was a lecture before the party, then they couldn't. Guests don't mind sushi going dry due to a long speech, but they don't like seeing their tables get wet with condensation from bottles of beer. And, more than anything, they certainly don't want to drink warm beer. That's why beer has to be served right before a toast. However, there's always a speech before a toast, and usually a long one. Especially at a big party like this, there are lots of guests that give speeches, so it's extremely difficult to know when to serve. For that reason, the bottles end up sitting outside by the banquet room, and people end up drinking warm beer anyway. There were several dozen tables with white tablecloths on them in the banquet room. Approximately 8 people were sitting at each table. There were at least a few hundred people in this room. The banquet room was filled with excitement. There were many plates with many different kinds of food on each table. A sushi platter, a sashimi platter, a fruits platter. Also along the wall there were cooks ready to serve fresh sashimi. All the guests appeared to be well-mannered gentlemen, and clearly were notable people in various different fields. The huge and beautiful chandelier above them clearly indicated that this hotel held a status good enough for these famous people. An elderly gentleman was giving a lengthy speech on the stage before making a toast. Usually people don't like such long speeches, especially if it's before a toast. But the guests occasionally shouted yes, yes, and sometimes gave him loud applause, filling the room with their fervor. Well, maybe fervor was a pleasant way to put it. It was probably more accurate to say their excitement was bizarre. Which country would actually teach people not to show respect for their own flag? There are no others. It's happening only in Japan. That's right. And is forcing people to respect their national flag and anthem in instruction of their freedom? That's a foolish idea. Listen, love for one's national flag and anthem comes naturally to all. To know ourselves, to know our culture, to understand our history and our country itself. Those are the things that make you realize that you are a Japanese citizen. That make you understand the part you play as a citizen of this country. And the feeling you get from that is love towards your own country. However, those anti-Japan teachers are proclaiming that it's militaristic brainwashing. Those stupid claims are wrong. What are those people doing anyway? They're teaching our children to hate being Japanese. They're the ones brainwashing them with this self-destructive education. They are teaching our children that Japan should be ashamed of itself, and that they should be ashamed of being Japanese. I'd say with any nation or country, it should be a balance. You should be proud of your nation, proud of your flag, but you shouldn't want your nation to conquer the world or some shit. Basically, you shouldn't view yourself as superior, but you shouldn't be ashamed of yourself. And yeah, you should definitely be proud of your own flag, but unless another country is actively, wanting to hurt you or something, you really shouldn't hate anyone either. Forget who you are and deny your country. That's what they are teaching them. These innocent children listen and believe such nonsense. Of course they do. They go to school and learn things, right? If their teachers teach them that, of course the children believe it. Can you believe such corruption exists? We must do something about this country's education now, no matter what it takes. The sound of applause filled the banquet room. All the gentlemen agreed, and expressed that they felt the same way by cheering him on. After that, a gentleman wearing a cloth sash approached the stage. The hall welcomed him onto the stage with another round of thunderous applause. A rousing theme from a popular drama series played as he took the stage, but it was entirely unnecessary before the overwhelming applause. The man's sash carried his name written in large letters along with the name of the prefecture he was running for office in. Let me introduce you to a patriot. Something, 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 something Kun. This man has served the former governor as his right-hand man as a director of the office of the governor for many years, supporting the prefecture's government for a long time. Since the previous governor has decided to retire, he was appointed as the next governor. Unfortunately, we have those anti-Japan teachers in our prefecture. While they proclaim freedom of education and freedom of thought, they're shamelessly forcing an anti-Japan education down on our children. They don't teach real history. They teach our children that everything was Japan's fault. They don't even mention the true purpose of the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, or all those who fought to save Asian peoples from Western control. They don't even talk about how many Asian countries were actually Western colonies before Japan stood up for our freedom during the war. Our country has recovered amazingly since then, yet our children don't know any of that because those teachers don't teach them. How truly, truly sad. I can't stand the fact that those anti-Japan teachers are actually teaching our children alongside those teachers who take teaching seriously. They are insulting our educational institutions. My personal feeling on the matter is that I don't like historic revisionism, and I think history should be, taught just 100% accurately. No emotional sort of bias one way or another. Just the facts. What was. I will become a governor and get rid of those teachers. I will straighten out our education system, and make sure our children will grow up to be decent young people who can carry on Japan's future. He, Kun, announces his candidacy for the next year's prefectural governorship. We appreciate your support for him. I promise I will straighten out Japan's education system. Thank you for your support. Again, the banquet room filled with applause. The man was receiving a standing ovation. I need to explain a bit about this banquet before you misunderstand. It wasn't the conference of a political association or a lecture by a political candidate. It was hard to believe, but this was nothing more than a meeting of a college's alumni association. Everyone should be familiar with what those are. Whether it's elementary school, a junior high school, or college, once you graduate from one of those, you normally belong to an organization or alumni. You receive invitations for reunions where you enjoy talking about the good old days. However, there are many different types of such organizations. Some are simple and some are united with much tighter bonds. And once an organization becomes united with those tight bonds, it's no longer a simple organization of alumni. Rather, it becomes a significant faction known as an alma mater clique. In Japanese society, it's traditional for graduates to form tighter bonds that go beyond the level of an organization. Also, the more superior the alma mater, the stronger that tendency holds true. The Imperial University, one of the best universities in the country, is famous for the deep bonds its graduates form. Why do superior people like to bond? It may be because they take pride in being superior. But more than that, maintaining connections is the most significant reason. Yeah, I do hear networking is supposed to be the most efficient way of making money or getting promoted or getting better jobs, especially in professional spheres or corporations. However, as somebody who has basically worked manual labor his entire life, and I will never be able to own a home my entire life, and honestly, I worry if I'll even be able to continue paying rent in the future. Yeah. Though I guess I can't complain too much. I waste money occasionally buying video games or, fast food. So. They are likely to succeed and become important people. When they do, the unity of their alumni association gains immeasurable meaning. In fact, even today, the Imperial University graduates maintain their tight academic clique, and they hold great influence throughout many different fields. They interact with other universities as well. So the graduates' bonds are extremely tight even today. Additionally, while Imperial University usually refers to the University of Tokyo, sometimes it's used to mean all 7 major universities in Japan. They are located in Tokyo, Kyoto, Tohoku, Kyushu, Hokkaido, Osaka, and Nagoya. The only reason I know how to pronounce some of those is literally because of anime. Or because a lot of times some of these very large cities are known in history. So usually either in a school class or on the news itself, these cities are mentioned by name. Heck, in many movies even. I wonder what cities people living in Japan are familiar with due to the news or movies or anime, to where they know the correct pronunciation of said cities purely because they're so well-known, such well-known cities that they're mentioned in school classes as well as the news. They're all great schools. Heck, I imagine it's a universal thing. For example, the same way I understand, I'm familiar with the names Tokyo and Kyoto because, they're very well known. I imagine people all over the world, whether they're in England, Germany, France, Russia, Australia, or any other nation in the world that has, I would say, first world status, which would basically be almost all of Europe and Asia and North America, and, well, honestly, most of the world in general. I just don't feel like listing off every part of the world. It's like we list off 5 countries, and I'm like, okay, I'm done. But the main point is this. I would expect the same way I know how to pronounce Tokyo, that people in France... France? Do you guys say France or France? I guess it depends on accent. Accent? I'm just saying, people in Germany, France, England, the UK, Russia, Australia, would know about Tokyo as well. Simply because it's... But in the same regard, there would be certain... Like looking at this word, I would not think to pronounce it Hokkaido. But I've heard the word said before, so I'm familiar with the pronunciation. But if I were to look at this, if it was my first time, I would probably say Hokkaido or something like that. I'm just saying, looking at it, it's not how I would think it's pronounced. Same way of like the German language. If you're not familiar with that, if you were to see the word wunderbar, you would pronounce it wunderbar. And of course, hearing the words differently in English, like wonderful, if I remember the translation of that correctly. Then again, there are similarities between English and German. I will say this. I do want to learn German, Japanese, French, and Hebrew, but honestly, I'm not even sure if I'll even learn one of the languages. But I would say Japanese, it's interesting, but I would say German. While I would think I would have less exposure to German as opposed to Japanese due to all the anime I've watched, I would say German is more, especially out of Japanese, German, between German, Japanese, French, and Hebrew, German would be the closest to my own native language. So it would at least be the easiest and most capable for me to learn. Now that being said, it would still take a great deal of effort and time, and especially if I keep procrastinating, but I'm trying to do a lot of things, so it's not like I'm not doing nothing. I'm just saying, if I lived for 1,000,000 years, I don't think I'd ever run out of things to do. I just hope I would be in prime physical condition, Basically, if I could be like 22 years old or some shit, but like live for millions of years, I don't think I'd ever actually, as long as I had good conditions around me and good food and stuff, I don't think I'd ever get bored. Granted, I get bored every day, but you guys know what I mean. I would still see, like, it's like the same way, like, I always have, like, I tend to get bored and my concentration tends to just bounce around a lot, but at the same time, I'm always interested in something. Same regard that I'm very fucking depressed, but I appreciate my life and have never tried to harm it, and, well, I don't want to die. Though I think that depression stuff may be more so just certain bad things have occurred. I don't remember what a hug feels like. Maybe certain chemical responses. But, oh well. I feel like there was something else I was going to say in regard to all this, but I completely forgot. I went off topic, and I feel like I was going to go into a different discussion, and like my memory just completely failed me there. So yeah, I don't feel like I gave enough information in the video for anyone listening to know what I was going to talk about, so it's not like you guys can remind me in the comments. But I feel like there was something else, like, big discussion I was going to go into, and I can't remember it at all. The elderly gentlemen in this banquet room were each from one of those organizations. However, not every graduate would get an invitation here automatically. It is a society of select gentlemen, and in order to become a member of, one must first fulfill several conditions such as recommendation from an existing member, contribution to the society, and possession of status, and so forth. Therefore, all the members are important people from different fields, and obviously the power of this organization is of a political nature. But there's one more very important criterion one has to meet to join. Strong patriotism, a heart that longs to contribute to Japan in its rebirth. As a result, this organization has become extremely nationalistic. Up on the stage, the candidate for the prefectural governorship was still talking passionately. And among those elderly gentlemen in the crowd, Takano can be found. Takano seemed used to this kind of conference, and seemed unsurprised at anything that was said, but at the same time she looked rather fed up with it. As she was in attendance, she must have had been one of their members, which meant she possessed not only an extremely excellent academic background, but that the older gentleman here had acknowledged her equivalent contributions to society, and that she possessed strong patriotism. However, her academic background was the only qualification she had met to join. She was only able to join as a special case because of her connections. She didn't even hold prejudiced ideas like the other members did. So why was she here today? Probably because of the same reason as the other men giving a speech up on stage. The man on the stage didn't actually have prejudiced ideas, much like Takano. He only prepared a speech that he knew the guests would like. Politicians only want votes. Each and every person has a vote, but appealing to each one of them takes too long. So the most efficient way is to appeal to organizations with a unified idea and a unified will. In other words, this man was giving this speech so he can garner support from those powerful people. The elderly gentlemen in the banquet room will then do their best to support him since he appears to share their ideals. They can offer many different kinds of expediency, support, and assistance. To an outrageous degree, I might add. If the day's events continued in the same way, the organization would likely decide to officially support him. They will probably give him a great deal of financial aid. They'll assist him in different ways as well. Of course, the man on the stage won't be the only one gaining something. When he wins the election and becomes governor next year, the organization will welcome the governor as a new member and gain even more political influence. And eventually the organization will become so powerful that nobody can ignore it. Those of you reading this right now probably get the sense that they're no mere alumni association. You'd be absolutely right. After reaching this level, they were a fine syndicate. No, they would be a secret society if the group wasn't so open about its activities. Now, I'm sure some of you readers are brushing this off, thinking there's no way such a suspicious organization could exist in Japan. But everything I have explained is entirely true. There are several such influential groups and organizations within our society, and you need to understand that they hold powerful political clout and influence our national policies. Some are alma mater cliques, like the one I've described above. Others are scientific societies serving different parties, industrial groups, advisory committees, religious organizations, community service groups, and so forth. Also, there are right wings and left wings, the hawk and the dove. I won't go listing their specific names here, yet you've probably read them every now and then in your average newspaper. In Japan, the terms for such forces aren't very common. Most of you readers probably think of suspicious organizations wearing white hoods when you hear the phrase secret society and laugh it off. Now I was thinking more like the Illuminati stuff. That's usually what usually is talked about most in conspiracy stuff. But unfortunately, that's a huge mistake. In America, where there's far more territory and citizens, there's way more groups like that, of course. In the United States of America, it's a very large area of land. I mean, I live in Ohio, and if I remember correctly, Ohio is comparable. Not as big, mind you, but it's comparable in size to all of Germany or all of France or all of Spain. It's a very large span of land. There's, I think last check, about 350 million people just in the United States alone. It's a very large area of land, and we are a very large group of differing opinions on stuff. But I will say this. There are some extremist groups like the KKK that obviously I think are almost universally despised by like most Americans, myself included in that. Just because, yeah, I don't like groups like, the KKK or the Nazis. And they possess such vast influences that ignoring them is impossible. So the terms they use for such forces doesn't apply to those on the scale of the syndicate. Sometimes people say that such groups have more power than the White House, and they are referred to as the shadow government. What is this, Metal Gear Solid 2? Even here in Japan, we had a shadow government before the war, our Zaibatsu. After we lost the war, the GHQ dismantled those blocks, but 40 years have passed since then. There's no guarantee our country hasn't given birth to another shadow government, given how good we are at collusion, groundwork, and backroom deals. I would assume such is true of every country, both on a not only local scales and regional scales, but also on national scales, even international. I imagine there's many international organizations that have the equivalent as such. So I'm sure for every possible government organization in the world, there is some organization in the background, at least trying to exist. Mio Takano was in fact attending a conference of such a shadow government. It might appear to be a guest house at a huge golf course. There were no golfers in sight, but by appearances that must be it. But appearances can be deceiving. This wasn't a golf course, but a huge backyard. The guest house was in fact a very stylish mansion. Normal people would be surprised to learn that this was a private residence. The interior of the building was as lavish as the exterior. There were beautiful carpets on every floor, expensive-looking decorations on the walls, and expensive-looking bottles of alcohol on the shelves. That's the kind of room Takano could be seen in. There was a knock at the door, and an old man in a wheelchair and a young woman pushing it entered. As Takano stood up to bow, the old man stopped by raising his right hand. No, no, you don't need to stand up. Long time no see. I know. Okay, I remember a tiny bit of what I was going to say. I don't remember the exact subject. Basically, I saw this pillow and I'm like, just imagine like, hey guys, it's kind of weird that I'm imagining like a large anime stuffed pillow or a plushie or a blahage or a teddy bear here instead of a pillow. But I do know, I did at least remember that the one conversation that I was going to have earlier, I was going to go with some tirade about, you know, otaku stuff and stuff about anime and nerds type stuff. But I don't remember what exactly about, but it had something to do with something related to otaku stuff. Yeah, something related to anime and video games in some way. Which, honestly, shouldn't be a surprise, given, you know, me. I've been telling you to come see me anytime, but you never do. It's great to see you, Koizumi-sensei? The old man sat down on the sofa with assistance from the woman. He was very old, his face was covered in wrinkles, and he could hardly do anything on his own. Even so, he still had a great deal of power and influence. Oh my, you haven't changed a bit, have you? I can see lipstick on your neck. Hee. Ho? Is that right? Ha 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 ha! Good grief, how embarrassing. There was no lipstick on his neck. The woman who was helping him with his wheelchair was too beautiful to be a mere helper. So Takano had suspected something. As it turned out, her guess was correct. Although he was so old that he could die the next day, he wanted to stay sexually active until the very end. Even the Grim Reaper would think that's just absurd. Mio-chan, you've become quite beautiful yourself. You're not a little girl anymore, eh? Oh, stop. If you really think that way, why did you try to touch my bottom? Ha 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 ha! What have you got to lose from having an old guy like me touch your butt? I'm sure you have plenty of chances to touch a softer butt, don't you? Hee. Takano and the old man enjoyed a tasteless conversation. They had clearly known each other a long time and were very close. The young woman came back in to serve tea. After she left, the old man started to speak. Anyway, down to business. I'm so proud of you, Mio-chan. I'm sure your grandfather in heaven is proud of you too. I hope so. But I'm not even close to approaching the level of my grandfather's great work. Takano-kun was unlucky in many different ways. The era he lived in. If he had lived in a different era, I'm sure he would have finished his research. But he lived in that era, and ironically, that was why he noticed the existence of the Hinamizawa syndrome. The world today is in the nuclear era, with America and the Soviet Union glaring at each other over mounds of nuclear stockpiles. It takes nukes to have authority as a major power. Yet we've forever abandoned our nukes, thanks to our 3 anti-nuclear principles. In this age, we are now a nation without nukes. How deplorable. In the middle of the 20th century, despite rising tensions between the East and the West, there was a temporary peace known as the Cold War, brought by a balance of nukes pointed at one another. Permanent memberships in the United Nations were monopolized by nations with nuclear arms. They secured their predominance with nukes, bound the world with nuclear non-proliferation treaties, eternally banning non-nuclear nations from the world stage. For Japan to become a nation that can compete with the world, it must develop nuclear arms, or something as powerful. That's what some people believed, at least. Realistically, Japan will never arm itself with nuclear weapons. I know. The citizens wouldn't accept it. Even if the government ignored their opinions and armed itself with nuclear weapons, it wouldn't work. By abandoning nuclear weaponry, Japan gained the deterrent power of the United States. Though some people thought the only way for Japan to become equal to the United States would be to get nuclear arms of their own. But realistically, that was impossible. Even if Japan armed itself with nuclear weapons, that wouldn't automatically let Japan join the great powers. I know there's moves for Greenland wants to become a state in America, as well as several provinces of Canada. I'm not opposed to any of that, though I do know there's many people in America that are opposed to any additional states in America. And of course, I wouldn't want any country or province to become part of America against its will. I'd want it to be entirely of their own decision. But I wouldn't be against Japan or other groups joining America and becoming a state. Though, of course, I imagine many people in Japan would be against that. And, of course, I fully support their stance being against it. I'm just saying if they were to ever be of the mind that they wanted to, or even wanted to just simply be stronger allies with America, or stronger trading partners, I certainly gladly welcome that. Takano and the old man discussed the balance of nuclear power in the world. Eventually, the sound of the cuckoo clock reminded them to return to the main subject at hand. The old man pointed to the attache case that had been sitting next to Takano. Takano nodded once and opened up and removed the contents. There were brand new bills packed in it. How much was actually in there? A bundle of brand new million-yen bills is 1 centimeter, so there must have been at least enough to make up 8 digits. There were also 2 more attached cases by her side. However, neither Takano nor the old man were surprised at all. Takano closed the attached case and bowed. Thank you very much, Koizumi-sensei. I'll never forget about this. Ha 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 ha. Money should be handled by younger people. I can't take it to heaven with me. I just hope this will be of assistance to you. Use it wisely. Of course I will. I'll use this money only to make my grandfather's dream come true. I envy Takano-kun. What a wonderful grandchild he has. I'm sure he's bragging about you up there. I haven't done anything yet. I'll have earned this praise when I complete my grandfather's work. I'm so jealous my boys are no good. They're only interested in making money. What really matters is how the money is spent. How you contribute to the country is what's most important. That's how you repay your debt to it, you know? Oh, so you're saying that treating all those lovers so lavishly is also a way of repaying your country? Of course! When they shop, the country makes money. Money goes around, you see? However, those lovers would probably end up buying some foreign goods. Things probably don't work out quite the way this old man thinks they do. Takano chuckled to herself. But the money I give to those women and the money I give you are completely different. I know that very well. You've worked very hard. You've retained trust and support from so many people. This is the first time I mention it. But Haruyama-kun and Mochizuki-kun both weren't sure about you because of your age at first. Ha 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 ha. That's why I'm acknowledging your efforts, and that's why I'm giving you this money. I understand. Also, for me to give you this money means that I recognize you as the official successor of Takano-kun's research. Thank you very much. Thank you for believing in me, and I truly appreciate it. No, don't mention it. This research is Takano-kun's and yours too. He wouldn't want anyone else to take over. So, thanks to all of your effort, I didn't have to spend too much time convincing the other old folks. Completing my grandfather's research is the least I can do for him. I won't begrudge any efforts towards that aim. Takano smiled as she remembered everything she had to go through to get to this point. It went without saying, but the old men around Takano saw her as someone from their grandchildren's generation, or maybe even younger. Just how much trouble did Takano have to endure in order to gain the trust of those with such a large generation gap? It was hard to describe to those who couldn't even imagine her trouble, but Takano earned it. She gathered allies, drove away enemies, garnered support, and forced them to recognize her. She spent a long time establishing trust and rising to a status that the old men would welcome, which was all the more reason this meeting was a reward for her many days of hardship. Now that she officially had a powerful influence backing her, she could spread her wings and see the completion of her grandfather's unfinished research. Well, now that you're officially continuing Takano-kun's research, there's something I need to tell you, Mio-chan. What is it? I'm listening. The old man paused and pulled an expensive cigarette from the cigarette holder on the table. Takano lit it up for him. She didn't smoke herself, but knowing that the old man did, she kept a lighter in her pocket. The constant build-up of little gestures like that were how she gained the trust she held today. Takano-kun noticed Hinamizawa syndrome in Manchuria, not Japan. Yes, according to my grandfather's journal, according to Showa 15, he learned that many soldiers sent from Hinamizawa to Kwantung Army expressed terminal symptoms, which led him to surmise that an unknown infectious parasite dwelled in Hinamizawa. Under the harsh conditions of war, people sometimes lost their minds. In those conditions, those who were sent to a faraway battlefield from Hinamizawa spent their days under duress, and occasionally they exhibited terminal symptoms, hallucinated, and caused twisted incidents. Yet all that occurred in the extensive chaos of the battlefield. Every incident was handled separately, and no one suspected there was an underlying cause. At the time, Takano-kun was working as a military physician in the Kwantung Army. He was researching the prevention of different infectious diseases. And one day, he noticed that several incidents of deranged behavior were occurring among soldiers from the same hometown. He hypothesized that these symptoms were unique to those from Hinamizawa and began his own personal research. He hired soldiers from Hinamizawa, as workers in his research center and studied them there. Then he learned of the unique Hinamizawa faith in Oyoshiro-sama, and he was convinced that he found an infectious parasite with unique properties. Some may wonder how he could be so certain that these symptoms were caused by an unusual parasites. At the beginning of the 20th century, German doctors proved that some unknown diseases were caused by bacteria and parasites. At the same time, it was too far of a jump to assume that unknown pathogens could be behind unknown diseases. I'll say this. In the past, many diseases, viruses, bacteria, parasites, and other conditions, even mental health conditions or genetic conditions, were blamed on demonic possession. Now, granted, I am a believer in God and Jesus and much more. And I do believe that there are legitimate cases of people being possessed or influenced by demons or other things. That being said, I would say the vast majority of incidences have scientific explanations. Now, that being said, that's not to say that all are explained by scientific. And I'm not saying something simply is supernatural because it's not currently understood by science, even by modern science. But I am saying that there are definitively things that are of supernatural origin, or of any type of non-scientific origin that wouldn't be. But I'm simply saying that the vast majority of stuff is caused by bacteria, viruses, parasites. But yeah, there are supernatural entities, ghosts, spirits, demons, angels, all that stuff. Heck, one could even say stuff about aliens or other entities, or even AI. Heck, maybe you could have machines, whether they be satellites or something much closer that could actually have an influence on a person. Or even just hypnosis or government propaganda, brainwashing, stuff in culture, or even just personal family issues, or genetics, or just how you were personally raised in your own life. There's many different factors. And even if you're of the opinion that, there is no way for a machine to be used to influence the function of a human brain, you cannot dismiss the existence that there are those in, very, very esteemed scientific communities and military and corporations that believe it can be done so and actively are working to try to do so. Whether or not it's possible, or if they would even if it is possible, if it's something they would ever succeed at or have already succeeded at, that's of course debatable. But it's not debatable that there are people that do think that and are actively trying to do that. In the same regard, you can debate the existence of God, but you cannot debate the existence of religion. Simply put, it is a definitive fact that there are books of religious texts and that there are people that believe it. That is a fact. Now, whether or not the things in those books are true, that of course can be debated. Like the Bible. There's many people that would debate whether or not the Bible actually is true or not. But there is no debate that the Bible exists, and there's people that read it and believe it. That is a fact. Now, it does make me think of other things though, like take rabies. Apparently there's lots of seals that are getting rabies, because technically they're basically water puppies. They're basically dogs that swim. Well, because technically dogs swim, but seals can swim better. But I'm like, how does that work? Like, obviously it works because it's the same type of blood-brain disease that but at the same time that affects something of acetyl, I can't remember. But the main issue is this. Heck, there's some nerve agents that work on the same principle, isn't there? Okay, we're getting off topic. Main point is, we're getting off topic of the already off topic. Main point is this. There are seals that have rabies, which obviously makes the water even more terrifying than it already is. But rabies makes, it makes the afflicted scared of water. How does that work for something that lives in the water? Like, rabies makes you scared of water. But seals live in water. I don't know. Then again, like I said, there's discussions of when it comes to microbiology stuff, genetic conditions, viruses, bacteria, parasites, even funguses, and molds and stuff. Heck, in the future, if we ever have nanomachines, there's even the possibility of, say, nanomachines being an issue. Heck, there's even concerns about stuff like prions. And of course, there's other things like chemical reactions, toxins, radiation. For instance, in modern times, it's revealed that, I don't know how to pronounce that, berries cause vitamin B1 deficiency. At the time, it was too far of a jump to assume that unknown pathogens could be behind unknown diseases. It wasn't too far. But at the start of the 20th century, many loudly proclaimed that it was the work of an undefined pathogen. Yes, my grandfather predicted that his research would be valuable to the army, so he asked for a budget, but they laughed at him. But they just laughed at him. And that's true when it comes to, understand, because here's the thing. That's the whole basics of science, is you're supposed to have a hypothesis. And then you try your best to either prove or disprove that hypothesis. Regardless of your own biases or your own, even if you desire it to prove one way or the other, you should have, scientific integrity to just be, true to the facts. You shouldn't change or lie anything in order to make it fit some viewpoint that you have. Though, you can still maintain your viewpoint to say that there's more to look into at that, but you should always be honest with, the statistics and the facts and how things work. As a researcher, her grandfather was very talented and passionate, but when it came to gaining the aid of political powers, he simply struck out. Hinamizawa syndrome, know the possible existence of a parasite that infected the human brain and controlled emotions. Even though he made the remarkable achievement of discovering a mystery no one had explained before him, he was unable to convince others of that achievement, and spent his life alone, unable to garner support and unable to achieve proper recognition for his achievement. Independent research has its limits, but it's usually the founding and start point of most things. Heck, I still think it's fascinating that, the Wright brothers did, of building planes and starting flight. And think how far we've come since then. But obviously, one, that was outlandish thought for them to be having, and a lot of a risk, and certainly lots of people were just fucking laughing at them for it. And yet, they are literally the beginning of aerospace technology, and flight, and humanity eventually taking to the stars. Heck, the person who first proposed the idea of microbiology and microorganisms, and the idea that doctors should definitely wash their hands with soap and water more before surgery, actually was put in a mental asylum. Because the idea of cells and organisms and bacteria, that didn't make sense to anybody. But at the same time, I feel like things in both scientific and religious and, every sphere of thought should be open-minded. You should always want to learn more. You should always want to understand things more. You should be always open to looking at things from a new direction. To open your mind. You shouldn't be, dogmatic about it. You should simply wish to grow and learn. Talented people, funding, and backup. A research project can be successful only if it has all those things are present. Takano had noticed her grandfather's mistakes, and that was why she did everything she could to obtain all of that. The military at the time was hoping for a low-cost, immediate-acting weapon. While Takano's research was extremely intriguing, it didn't meet the military's expectations. But I heard you were the only one who understood my grandfather's research, weren't you? In his journal, he calls you his best friend. We came from the same hometown. It was a miracle to run into someone from the same town on such a distant battlefield. Although we weren't close in age, we became very good friends. So we talked a lot. Many times, he told me his research would be revolutionary, and asked me to lay groundwork to secure funding for full-scale research. I read in his journey that you talked to many different people about his research. Unfortunately, its value was never recognized, but I'm sure your support meant a lot to him. But I was never able to really do anything for him. That's why I want to help you, Mio-chan. Helping you is like atoning for my mistakes. Thank you very much. He was lucky to have you as his best friend. If only there were more understanding people like you in the military's upper echelon. It's very regrettable to think that my grandfather's life might have been different. The old man closed his eyes and paused for a moment. Shortly after that, he looked into the distance and spoke. Actually, that isn't true at all. The higher-ups were interested in Takano-kun's discovery. What? I've never heard that before. Then why didn't they support his research? Something came up and they couldn't let him look into Hinamizawa syndrome. Only a few of the top brass and myself knew the reason. Now that all but myself have passed, I think I should tell you, Mio-chan, since you're carrying on his work. What came up? What was it? Takano had believed until this day that her grandfather's research was ridiculed by everyone, which was the reason why it had never gained any recognition. Her grandfather had asked the military for funding, so he could uncover the secret of Hinamizawa syndrome during the war. But just like the old man had said earlier, the military wanted an instant-acting weapon. That was why they weren't interested in his research. That's what she had believed. But as it turned out, the military had actually shown an interest after all. Before I go on, I need to explain about the Kuomintang army in Manchuria at the time. While the Kuomintang army was sanctioned in Manchuria, opinions were divided on whether to advance our forces north or south. At the time, Japan had troops in Manchuria, but opinions Opinions were divided on advancing north to deter the Soviet Union or advancing south to expand our territory and secure resources. But the Soviet Union and its predecessor, Russia, being a landlocked, frozen nation, they had long yearned for an ice-free port that wouldn't freeze over in winter. They had made numerous attempts to expand their territory southward too. Those expansionist policies were said to be a cause of the Russo-Japanese War. In the history books it's said that Japan won the Russo-Japanese War, but it was actually a draw, ending in peace signed at the Treaty of Portsmouth. Both sides had simply set aside their spears after mutually exhausting their forces. It wasn't like Russia capitulated and offered a complete surrender. As a result, the perception of the Russian threat continued to smolder. Later, the Russian Empire was overthrown by a revolution, but Japan was unable to shake the threat that the new Soviet Union would advance south. According to the history books, Japan went south. They signed the Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact and abandoned the northern advance. As a result, when the Great Patriotic War began, the Soviet Union was able to respond to pressure on the German front by pouring in their eastern forces. Though the Germans had managed to lay siege to Moscow, the Soviets launched a massive counteroffensive that reversed the tides of war. Even with the Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact, the Soviets couldn't tell if Japan would attack them at some point. Because of that, the Soviets had to leave some forces in the Far East, and they weren't able to devote enough troops to the German front. For starters, the Soviets had forged the Germany-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact too, yet Germany broke that treaty and attacked the Soviet Union. To make matters worse, Japan and Germany had forged a military alliance. With all those factors in play, the Soviets naturally couldn't trust Japan to uphold their neutrality pact. Ironically, the Soviet Union was the one who broke the pact, but I won't go into that now. Exactly. Hitler signed the Tripartite Pact because he expected Japan to keep the Soviets' other front checked, but ultimately Japan abandoned the North. With the superior German offensive, many supported the idea of waiting and watching it play out. They believed that even if we did advance north, it would be after Germany conquered Moscow. However, that plan was exposed to Sorg. I don't know how to pronounce that at all. Sorge? Sorg? Sorg? Sargost? Everyone's like, that's an area from fucking Mordor. Yeah, Shadow War. It's a game about orcs and stuff. It's Lord of the Rings. It's a fun video game. It's on PS4. The Soviets transferred their heavy tanks from their Far East border to the German front. That secured Germany's defeat at Moscow, and the Germans began seeing a string of defeats, starting with the Battle of Kursk. It was a turning point in history, huh? During the Cold War, the Soviet Union was recognized as a global power, but at least in Showa 15, the Kuomintang army didn't think it was a particular threat. Japan had earned a victory with the Russo-Japanese War, and they took the new Soviet Union government lightly, assuming it wouldn't be as stable after overthrowing the Russian Empire. That underestimation was corrected after the I have no idea. Nomonhan? Huh. Makes me think of Zone of Enders, the second Wonder, a very, very good game for the PS2. In the Showa 16, after several fierce short-term battles with the Soviet Union's advanced mechanized corps, some people say corps, or cores, it's core, that led to the great losses, the Kuomintang army realized that they shouldn't, the Capsule Corps, shouldn't fight the Soviets, and that inclined Japan toward the Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact. But at the very least, up until the Nomonhan incident, the Kuomintang army was strongly conscious of the Soviets and divided on advancing north or south. Thanks to that, they were also voices advising caution, suggesting we avoid all-out war with China in order to shore up our forces against the Soviets. But the Sino-Japanese War broke out after the Marco Polo Bridge incident, right? I shouldn't laugh at that. July Showa 12. The Japanese and Chinese armies were staring at each other across the Lugo Bridge in Beijing. It was the middle of the night on July 7th. The Chinese army fired on the Japanese army in training, and they engaged in combat. This triggered the long Sino-Japanese War. Yes, according to historical records, that incident triggered the Sino-Japanese War, but with the opinions divided over advancing north or south, the army was equally divided over a full-scale confrontation with China. No, in fact, we even received orders from the General Staff Headquarters to resolve the matter quietly before the incident grew much bigger. So those supporting the northern advance wanted to settle the Battle of Lugo Bridge quietly. For some reason, I want a bunch of Reese cups. You know the thin Reese cups? There's both milk chocolate and dark chocolate. I want to get a bag of each. Insisting that conflict with China was pointless in the light of their anti-Soviet strategy. You know what another thing I'm thinking about doing? Like you normally make grilled cheese sandwiches with butter. Just sometimes you add like basil and stuff. What if I were to use other things? Like beef tallow. Like just take a butter knife and put a little beef tallow on each side of the bread and cook a grilled cheese sandwich with beef tallow instead of butter. Granted, butter's better, but I've never made... Heck, I've in general never really used beef tallow really in cooking much. I've predominantly just relied on olive oil and, just butter or vegetable oil. Insisting that the conflict with China was pointless in light of their anti-Soviet strategy. However, those on the mainland supporting the southern advance used this incident as a cause to dispatch more troops to China. They enacted hard policies against China, and thus the Marco Polo Bridge incident became the trigger for the Japan-China War to enter all-out war. After that, their bitter struggles in the Nomonian incident, Japan greatly devised their Soviet strategy. They signed the Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact and secured the route for their... You guys say route or route? Same way, like either, for the southern advance. Also, Sino-Japanese War got worse and worse. If the incident hadn't happened, it's possible history would have gone very differently. Maybe we would have ended up in a war with them anyway. However, the South faction didn't get the chance. The military authorities would have kept restraining the Soviet Union, and the Soviets would have had to divide their forces between East and West. And maybe Germany could have invaded Moscow. Then Japan could have gone to Siberia. The map could have been very different today. Germany wouldn't necessarily have won the war if it had succeeded in taking Moscow. England was keeping its strength on the other side of the Dover Strait. After all, and the United States was poised to enter the conflict. Besides, Napoleon once occupied Moscow. But in the end, he couldn't beat their winter and had to withdraw. I think that's the biggest reason why a lot of countries invading Russia had a big problem. Is one, the winters in Russia are fucking horrible. I have never lived in Russia, and I don't think I'd ever want to. Also, I don't think I would, like their policies and politics. And I don't think most Russian, in terms of the society, would, want me to live there either. I just don't feel like I would fit in. I will say this. I think that anyone who moves to other countries should have a degree of pride and support for that country they go to. If you come to America, you should, love America and want to make it a better place. And want to actually, integrate into society. In the same regard, if I were to go to England, or if I were to go to Germany, or France, or say if I went to Japan, or Spain, or even Russia, well, I should have a degree of pride in that country if I'm going there to live there long term. Now, it's different if I was working part of some scientific group, which, keep in mind, I was actually interested in becoming a scientist when I was very young. Hypothetically, I could have. I remember when I was 12, 13, 14 taking IQ tests, an IQ of 132. I graduated high school with an honors diploma, 4.0, straight A's, did calculus, physics, and chemistry, and stuff like that. I was even an Eagle Scout. And I've always had a great interest in reading, as well as history and science. and I mean science of every kind, and I just read literally everything from anime otaku stuff to the crazy conspiracy stuff to stuff about every religion doctrine I can find and martial arts and stuff. Now, granted, how much I actually retain is questionable, and I do spend a lot of time just talking to myself. But at one point I was interested in the idea of being a scientist. I imagine if I was actually a little scientist, I'd probably be in a biochemistry in terms of organic chemistry. I've never been mechanically inclined, and I'm not just making jokes about how I have a terrible sense of balance and I am not athletic. I've never had a 6-pack or a 4-pack in my life. Maybe one day. I'll actually do like a Lumi Zoldyck cosplay or some shit. Or maybe a 2003 XX Guilty Gear, old style Testament cosplay or something. But because the old sounds like more like fucking Death Clock. Fucking metal! Everything's fucking metal! And of course, I have a lot of interest in music, art. I can't say I'm not very good at that stuff, but I do have a lot of interest in it. Same way of learning other languages, but of course, I have not made any progress on that. I don't think I'm naturally inclined to that. But I'll say this: I am not only not naturally inclined to mechanics, but I'm just actively shitty at it. When it comes to actually working with actual physical machines, or actually properly understanding how physical machines work, while I do find it fascinating still, I am horrible at it. Like, I would never be a good mechanic for, cars. I would never be a good car mechanic. Both in terms of the physical ability to do it, as well as just literally understanding it, I would not be good at it. It's not a proclivity I would have. Same regard, I have a terrible sense of direction. I get lost easily, both in terms of a GPS system and in terms of discussions. I'll say this. I definitely have, as far as I can look from symptoms online, autism, ADHD, PTSD, trauma issues, abandonment issues, hypervigilance, borderline personality disorder, severe long-term clinical depression. As well as I talk to myself a whole lot. And I have lots and lots of dreams. But the main thing I'm going with here, the main point I was trying to bring up in talking about that is I definitely know that I have something called disorganized speech, which is even apparent in my text and my writing. Like if I were to write out things in words, and everyone's like, "What do you mean?" Of course, you're like, "I mean, in terms of physical writing, I'm trying to make a differentiation." Everyone's like, "You mispronounced that." I don't care. I'm trying to highlight the difference between actually physically writing something out with your hand, as opposed to typing it on a keyboard, and opposed to talking out loud. Because I've noticed, whether it's me just casually talking like this, which I'll say this, I talk much more doing these Let's Plays than I have in the entire rest of my life. What can I say? I'm a very quiet and very stoic individual when it comes to life and human interaction. Now, granted, I do feel I'm capable of sociability. I just tend to be antisocial. Various reasons for that. That being said, I tend to be very stoic. I don't really express emotions very much. I don't cry in public. And some people, here's the thing, I don't express emotions very well in front of other people. So much so that people sometimes think that I'm a fucking robot or something and think I don't have emotions. But when it comes right down to it, I actually have a lot of emotions, and they're very, very strong. And they're very, very much at the forefront of my mind. In the same regard, I don't cry in public in front of people. Granted, there have been a few exceptions, but those were under, I would feel, extreme conditions, like people dying and stuff. So I feel that's forgivable. That being said, I am the kind of person who has, one, very strong emotions, And, well, there are things that have made me feel very, very sad. So I would say I've at least cried thousands and thousands of times in private. Heck, there's times I've laid in the dark in front of a fan listening to nightcore music and just crying my eyes out with just tears and snot all over my face. Heck, I remember recording a video, which is not on YouTube, because honestly, listening to the sounds I made me feel too sad, and I didn't want to hear that again. I don't ever want to make that noises again. But basically, it was like 13.5-hour long video, which also YouTube did not want to get uploaded anyway, and I didn't want to try to divide it or any of that sort of stuff. I just or re-record it. But basically, I spent like 13.5 hours. But I spent several hours just crying at screaming volumes while laughing at screaming volumes, until the point that apparently the human body has a limit to how much stress it can handle, at which point my body just started shaking and almost seizuring a bit as I started just vomiting everywhere, because apparently there's limits to how much stress the human mind and body can handle. And apparently me crying for like 7 hours straight while screaming and laughing and crying is apparently not healthy. So, main point I was trying to say with that is, I'm not very open about things, nor do I talk very much. And usually when I do talk to people, I avoid talking about myself. I tend to do a lot of listening. And I usually keep the conversation on other people or other subjects. And usually, if anyone ever turns the topic towards me, I keep it short and very ad-lib and to the point. For a person such as me who can go on and fucking spiral out of control in a verbal fucking rainstorm like this, I do keep myself very concise in the way I talk to people. Because I know me. Because I know that the way my mind works, that if I were to let myself just start talking to people, that I would do what I'm doing right now, and that is just flood them with. Because between this emotional tendency, as well as my just general direct of the fact that I just tend to talk to myself and have multiple lines of thought at all fucking times, lends itself really well to Let's Plays. I do understand that it would be socially not well received. And the fact of the matter is this: I tend to be very disorganized with it. It's not coherent. It's not concise at all. That's why usually I'll keep what. And again, if people ask me, "Oh, how are you doing?" my answer will be, even if I'm like doing absolutely horrible, "Oh, I'm okay. Yeah." And I'll try to keep things very short. And I tend to not really talk very much. I tend to not really express emotion, and I tend to not complain or bring up anything that's bothering me. But I definitely do talk a lot more while doing these videos. And I'll say this: in both my speech, as well as anytime I write with a pen or pencil, writing out paragraphs, or even when I type on a keyboard, all across the board in all three of those ways of expression, I definitely have disorganized speech. The way I communicate is definitely a bit of an incoherent mess and very disorganized. And it's sometimes when I try to force an organizational, structure to how I speak, it feels painful. Other than that, I do know, there's sometimes I'll try to I know at the very first video I ever made, I tried to at least write a little bulletin point list of certain things, so I at least have general topics to go to, and even that was a struggle to stick to. So, I'm just saying, I tend to be very withdrawn and don't talk very much, but I do have the tendency that if I were to talk, I can and do have a lot to say. But I do have my own emotional reasons to stay uncomfortable talking about things. But I can talk about a lot, and I tend to be very disorganized about how I express myself. It is one of those ifs, huh? The Axis might have won the war. Yes, it's possible that the gunshot from the Marco Polo Bridge incident changed the tide of history. Both sides had different opinions of who fired the shot, right? According to the Japanese side, a Chinese soldier fired a shot at the Japanese soldier who got too close to the Chinese camp. However, the Chinese side claimed the shot was a conspiracy invented by the Japanese military, but the shot was fired. Even though nobody knew who actually pulled the trigger, it sparked the war. Yes, that's what the history books say. But, Koizumi-sensei, what does that have to do with my grandfather? In the bridge incident, a shot was fired at a unit that was training in the middle of the night. Everyone was summoned for a roll call. They were missing one soldier. This soldier came back later, and it was said that he was sent as a messenger and got too close to the Chinese camp. By the way, did you know that soldier was from Hinamizawa? Eh? Really? When Takano was talking about Hinamizawa syndrome, he said that soldiers in Hinamizawa could suddenly fall into a deranged state. And we realized that the soldier in the Marco Polo Bridge incident was in fact from Hinamizawa. Then what about the first shot fired? I don't know the truth, but I think it's possible that a soldier in the terminal stage of Hinamizawa syndrome fired the shot. That soldier was killed in the incident. Since there was no record of it, nobody knows exactly how he died. The Japanese side claimed the Chinese army had fired them, and negotiated with that in mind. Just a scant few days after the incident, Japan demanded an apology to the Chinese, and as a show of force, dispatched 3 divisions of reinforcements. The Japanese side was, of course, opposed to that. The situation escalated at once. If research into Hinamizawa syndrome continued, the higher-ups thought it would negatively influence the Japanese army's claims. So in order to avoid the risk of traversing the political gray zone, they rejected Takano-kun's research. So because of that, they refused to even consider my grandfather's research long after the war ended too? Yes, that's exactly it. The war is over now, but there are still some conflicts there regarding historical recognition. Even if Takano-kun didn't mean for it to happen, if his research into Hinamizawa syndrome became public, it might cause the resurgence of quarrels over long-ended war. Certain authorities were afraid of that, so they made sure his research was ignored even after the war. I was long warned not to aid him in any way myself. Takano tried to remain calm, but she couldn't stop herself from grimacing. She had just found out the real reason why her grandfather's research had been ignored. It was because of the secret maneuvers by political masterminds. If those masterminds feared it so much, ironically that meant they acknowledged the importance of his research. Takano was saddened and frustrated to no end by her grandfather's lonely life. However, they are all dead now. I'm the only one who knows about this. If Takano-kun was still alive, I was going to apologize to him and give him my unconditional support, but he's no longer around. That's why I'm apologizing to you and offering to give you my full support instead. Are you sure? Wouldn't research into Hinamizawa syndrome dredge up those same subjects again? It's different now. Besides, research into the Hinamizawa syndrome may produce more than a mere local disease. Depending on your research, post-war Japan may gain a trump card that makes it a world power once more. So the tides and times have changed again. That's right. Unfortunately, Takano-kun didn't live long enough to see that tide change, but he has you to continue his research. So as long as I'm alive, I'll give you my full support. I promised to help Takano-kun, but because of various things, I couldn't do anything. So I want to make up for that as long as I'm alive. I think that's the best I can do for the man who called me his best friend. Koizumi-sensei, thank you so much. Oh, don't mention it. I'm glad I was able to tell you everything before I died. Anyway, until I'm gone, I'll make sure you get everything you need, okay? So if anything comes up, be sure to let me know. I'll do anything for you. Takano couldn't even imagine what kind of bond this old man and her grandfather had between them. But thanks to that bond, Takano was able to gain a powerful supporter. Tears welled up in Takano's eyes as she gave him an emotional look, but in her mind she was practically dancing at the promise of the old man's full support. The old man and Takano both bowed at the same time, to show each other their appreciation. Once that was done, the old man became a little more serious. After that far too lengthy preamble, he finally said what he really wanted to tell her. So there you have it. This is what I wanted to say. The Hinamizawa syndrome has the potential power to make history. It may even twist the fate of our country. So keep that in mind and be careful with your research. After the proprietor finished serving the food, she bowed and left. The room was very tastefully put together, reminding them of the tea ceremony room. While it was sparsely decorated, quite a bit of money had obviously gone into it. This was a very famous Japanese restaurant where many high-up officials and other important people held secret meetings. Takano was there, accompanied by about 5 gentlemen. She was sitting slightly further away from the men. They were clearly in a much more important position than she was. One of the men, wearing an expensive double-breasted suit, told Takano not to be so nervous. Please relax, Takano-san. What we read is very interesting to us. I can't believe this research was just sitting there for dozens of years. It is surprising. I thought most of the research on BC, biochemical weapons, the Japanese military conducted during the war failed to bear fruit, and nothing was left after the U.S. military confiscated even the fundamental research. I heard this research was barely even glanced at by the top brass. I see. So that's why nobody knew about it, and the GHQ didn't investigate it. In that sense, at least, it was truly fortunate. Interesting that Dr. Takano's research would be succeeded by a different Takano-san. I suppose that's fate. It's like the deceased is using your body to complete its life work. Hee? Maybe that's true. I feel a mysterious connection to him, too. Takano adored Takano Hifumi and called him grandfather, but she hadn't revealed that relationship to others. She realized it wouldn't be beneficial for people to think she was involving personal feelings in her continuing Dr. Takano's research. So publicly she once had exchanges with Takano Hifumi, and after his death discovered his research documents with the remains and chose to carry it on. At least that's how the story went. Well then, what do you think? The defense agency was very interested. Ha 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 ha. According to Nagawa, Defense Agency Technical Research Center and Development Institute showed great interest. They offered to sponsor the research too. Oh, that's wonderful. Congratulations, Takano-san. Thank you very much. Here's what they said. There's a research council for the next generation deterrence being led by experts from several different ministries. One of those is called the Alphabet Project. Have you heard of it, Takano-san? There was no way she would know about something like that, but it was very possible that these nationalists, too, researched something dangerous without citizens knowing about it. Society forms something like a web made of connections between people. People hold hands with other people who share the same ideas and end up knitting a net. Of course, some nets are well known, but there are some secret ones too. So there was no way of guessing just how the men at this meeting were connected. A society involving research in deterrent weapons for the next generation, the Alphabet Project. With those words, it was possible to imagine what that might entail. Deterrent weapons? That usually refers to nuclear technology. Weapons are normally used to destroy enemies. However, the general idea of deterrent weapons is very different. The assumption is that they won't actually be used against anyone. Nuclear weapons are largely used as a threat to prevent enemy invasion. Both the US and Soviets possess large stockpiles of nuclear arms, keeping each other in check, but they will never actually use them. Because if they did, there'd be a nuclear war and both countries would be destroyed. So they're like a legendary weapon you never draw. Of course, that last result only works because both sides have nuclear weapons. If one side lacks them, then they'll lose all military negotiation power. In other words, nations without nukes are powerless before nuclear-armed states. That can't be true. Japan abandoned nukes, and it still functions as a nation today. Or so some people may be thinking, but they're wrong. Japan abandoned nukes, but lies under the nuclear umbrella by allying itself with America. That means the nation functions thanks to America's nukes. However, that also means that we must resign ourselves to forever being a vassal of America. In order for Japan to escape that and become a powerful nation equal to America, it must possess its own deterrence, arms, and step out of that nuclear umbrella. That society must have been put together by experts who believe in that ideal. Given that even the name Alphabet Project makes sense. Nuclear weapons are weapons of mass destruction. However, weapons of mass destruction aren't always nuclear. They also include biological weapons and chemical weapons. Atomic, biological, chemical. The initials of these three words make up ABC. That's why weapons of mass destructions are sometimes called ABC weapons. I won't go into weapons of mass destruction that don't belong to those three categories. ABC, alphabet. In other words, Alphabet Project must be code for research into weapons of mass destruction. As it happened, this guess of Takano's was correct. By rights, Japan should possess nuclear arms. We established ourselves as a peace-loving nation after the war, and after our vast international contributions, we've been recognized as a permanent member of the UN. Yet until we possess nuclear arms, we won't be recognized as a proper nation. That is the long-held desire of a post-war Japan. Exactly. However, realistically, thanks to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the major nations hold a monopoly on nukes. Worse, our domestic public opinion is growing allergic to nukes, so foreign and domestic pressures make implementing them impossible. Biological and chemical weapons are sometimes known as the poor man's nuke. Small countries that can't own nuclear weapons have already started research into that kind of weaponry. Ha ha ha, Takano-san, please don't misunderstand us, okay? The purpose of our research isn't to obtain a biological weapon. Instead, our goal is to prevent such weapons from coming into Japan from other countries. So this is research into self-defense. I want you to understand that. Yes, I'm aware of that. Takano hated this Japanese tendency to make excuses, but she didn't let it show on her face. No matter what they said, they already saw the value in using this research toward biological weaponry. However, in truth, that was just an excuse as well. If they actually wanted to research biological weapons, then it would be much faster to research diseases like smallpox and anthrax, instead of an unidentified disease like Hinamizawa syndrome. So it wasn't actually correct to say that the defense agency was interested in it as a biological weapon. In other words, Takano needed a powerful sponsor who could back her up with funding, personnel, and a facility to conduct her research. So she used her connections and turned to the old men behind the government and economy, reaching out to each of them, and getting them to forcibly pull funding out of the defense agency under the excuse of its application toward biological weaponry. That was the truth. Therefore, her project wasn't officially recognized by the defense agency. To be exact, the people who were secretly controlled the defense agency were the ones who knew about it. These masterminds diverted funding from the defense agency to the Alphabet Project. And then they pushed for Takano's research to be a part of it. Takano gets her funding, and the influencers get to drain public funds through kickbacks. Considering that, it was doubtful that this project was generally about researching the next generation of deterrence arms. It was probably just an excuse for the masterminds to funnel money into their own pockets. Okay, so embezzlement. Gotcha. Well, those complicated matters didn't matter to Kano. Wasn't Asmongold and Nux Taku and Raging Golden Eagle and Rev Says Desu and Hiroe all talking about how US aid was doing that? Also Kirsch and Smug Alana. Those complicated matters didn't matter to Takano. Whatever these old men and influencers were planning wasn't her business. As long as she could get the funding for her research, that was enough. Either way, again, you guys say either or either way, Takano had found her sponsor. Which one do you say, Lunar? Both. I don't have a preference. I just tend to say either one. I guess we have our answer. I said either right there. But sometimes I say either. But I don't really have a preference. I probably do say either more often, though. Either way, Takano had found her sponsor. It was one of the biggest organizations around, too. This had always been her grandfather's dream. Takano was trying to stay calm, but she was about to jump up and down in excitement. Nakagoro, how do you fucking say that? That once the research says that once the kun. Okay, let's see what. Also, why is it kun and not like sama or san? I never really understood like how that stuff works in Japanese. Nakagawa-kun says that once the research gets underway, he doesn't mind buying it out. Although it's still incomplete, he definitely sees potential in it. You're absolutely right. This research is only halfway complete. Sufficient funding, facilities, and personnel will be indispensable. About that, here's where the negotiations start, but apparently they wish to take on this research in its entirety. I feel bad for saying this, but they think the burden is too much for you to bear alone. Hearing that put quite the damper on Takano's ecstasy. I'm not trying to make money off of this. I am working as a researcher purely out of intellectual curiosity. What I need is a sponsor, and what they seek are results. That was the relationship I had hoped to establish. Takano realized she was talking rather breathlessly, so she tried to calm herself down. Either way, they'd be backing the research. Considering they're hoping for results that merit the budget, they probably feel that Takano is still too young to handle it. I know. You've been working on this for a long time, and you don't want anyone to just grab it from you, right? I totally understand that. Of course, we've already informed them. So here is the compromise we came up with. First, we'll start your research as an offshoot of the Alphabet Project. Once you have the board of directors' approval, you'll be given an official funding. We'll have you participate in the project as an associate researcher, and you'll take part in the research that way. If she wanted their funding, she'd have to fall under their authority, of course. So far, she had no objections. However, the Research Society had listed a few conditions in exchange for funding this project. First, as was just mentioned, is to entrust the position of lead researcher to an individual that's skilled and talented in this field of research. I hate to interject, but who would be more knowledgeable about this than me, other than late Dr. Takano, of course? Now. Please calm down, Takano-san. I understand how you feel. Still, how is this any different from selling my research to this individual? This isn't what we discussed at all. Wah! Calm down, Takano-san. Those cunning old men didn't miss sight of the faint leak of anger that crossed Takano's expression. They gave evasive laughs, as if remarking how immature she still was if she let her emotions show over such a little thing, or how passionate she was. However, they weren't laughing to look down on Takano. On the contrary, they were trying to tell her to wait until the end. It's a way of emotional diffusing the bomb, so to speak. Of course, de-escalation. Or at least the intention of it. Of course, we'll make sure you get your way. Koizumi-sensei told me to take good care of you. Do you think I would just ignore you after he told me that? Don't worry. Please, let me work things out. I'll make sure you'll be happy. What do you mean? You see, I get to select the person in charge. Wahahaha! Everyone chortled except Takano. After a moment, she joined in. In other words, he meant that he would find just the right person. The defense agency had suggested finding an expert to lead the project because they didn't feel comfortable with just Takano. However, Takano's sponsor was the one who tasked with finding such a person. In that moment, Takano realized it. Ah, how wonderful, how wunderbar it is to have such a powerful backer. Let me work it out. I'll find some candidates for you. All you have to do is pick the one you think would be the most suitable, which means Takano is the one who chose Dr. Iri. Takano and Dr. Iri was not only picked for his skill and knowledge and eagerness and ambition, but also it was believed that he would be able to be manipulated by the organization and by Takano, and the Takano would be able to easily maintain her authority. And basically, Eri, in that sense, is more of a figurehead to be the one to take the forefront of any sort of fallout. Takano felt better after hearing that. While she wouldn't be the official head of the project, she would end up leading it from the shadows. Of course, she wasn't an expert per se. Having a partner would actually be beneficial. Give me some time to talk to the other end. I'll make sure you'll be happy with the outcome. Please, just be patient for a while. I understand. Thank you for everything. Oh, by the way, it's not just the defense agency. Nagata, I think I actually pronounced that correctly, Kun from the Ministry of Health and Welfare is willing to help you too. He introduced me to Ito-kun from the National Institute of Infectious Diseases. He's willing to help you with equipment and other technology. Really? Thank you so much. Wahaha, this is a national project, isn't it? Congratulations, Takano-san. This is all because of your efforts and the deceased Dr. Takano's hard work. Oh no, this is all because of Dr. Takano. I haven't done anything yet. Ah, being humble is a good virtue. Just like Koizumi-sensei told me, you truly are a nice person, aren't you? No wonder he adores you. Anyway, they want you to join the defense agency. Luckily, you have a doctor's license, right? We'll secure your position as a medical officer of the TRDI. Do you mean I'll be a public servant? I wasn't expecting that. All the organizations that are involved with the Alphabet Project are public institutions. The SDF is actually interested in this research as well, and they're making strong requests to dispatch some of their personnel too. The dogs. The mountain dogs. So depending on the circumstances, you may be treated as an SDF member. Well, just think of those matters as officials squabbling over jurisdiction. So to stand above those officials, you'll need your own official position. So, no matter what, we'll make sure you'll be happy, so please don't worry about anything. I understand. I'll let you work things out. But knowing Dr. Takano's research was once rejected by the old Japanese military, it's hard to believe that the self-defense force is interested in it now. Well, that couldn't be stopped. With the war situation worsening, the Japanese military sought something with immediate effect, something that could turn the war around. I don't think they were looking down on Dr. Takano's research. That wasn't true, of course. Takano already heard that confession from the old man. She exhaled. To her, it was like the meeting in front of her was happening somewhere far away. She had longed for this day to come, and worked so hard to reach it. Finally, her grandfather and his research were attaining recognition. This was the day she had dreamed of. So, she was frightened, just imagining that it might be an actual dream. True joy can't be felt all at once. Oftentimes, it's a delayed reaction. That's true of most emotions, actually. Takano thought that must be exactly what she was feeling. I imagine you'll probably be given a field officer's rank. Since you'll be second in command, you'll likely be a major. That's wonderful. Major Takano, huh? Ha! My, I'm a little jealous. As a man, I wish I had a rank like that. Boy, oh boy, Major Takano, huh? A major. What does that signify? Well, it's reasonably higher in rank system of the self-defense forces. It's like a sub-manager at a company, I guess. That will be your rank once the project gets underway. It's equivalent to a lieutenant commander in the old Japanese military. What a coincidence! Dr. Katano was also a lieutenant commander in the old military. Takano remembered something suddenly. They were right. Her grandfather had been a lieutenant commander in the Japanese military. Everything she had done until today was so she could continue her grandfather's research. Now everything had fallen into place. She had even been granted the same rank as her grandfather. She had always believed that succeeding his research would be proof that they had a bond tighter than blood, and now she would even be the same rank as him. This is fate, Takano thought. Maybe this is even a message from Grandpa. For Grandpa. Grandpa. Yes, it must have been a shout of encouragement from heaven. It was proof that she inherited not only his research, but his will as well. Takano couldn't help but feel a sense of destiny for attaining the rank of major. Grandpa, I'm finally here. Nobody else could hear her say that, but her grandfather in heaven could. That's what Takano believed. She had only come so far. There were still a lot of things to do for this research to be recognized as a great work. Otherwise, her grandfather won't become a god. She wouldn't become one either. You must become a god. That was in her grandfather's will. I was unable to do so. That line preceded it. It was her grandfather's dying wish. Her grandfather entrusted it to her. All of his research. A god can't be physically brought back to life. A god is made in the hearts of the people who remain alive. Her grandfather will live on in her heart. His exploits will be known to many, and all the scholars will fight to read his documents, to steal them from each other. And they will learn about Hifumi Takano, who began his research during the war. They will know that nobody understood him, and that he ended up devoting his lonely life to his research. And finally, they will extol his grand achievement. Weight of history got one step closer. Later, guys. Bye.